She was standing in a courtroom, 9 months pregnant, completely alone, no lawyer she could afford, no family behind her, just a waitress from Brooklyn in a thrift store dress. Facing 6 attorneys in $1,000 suits, across the aisle sat her mother-in-law, Victoria Whitmore, the woman who had thrown $50,000 at her chest and told her to terminate her pregnancy and disappear. The woman who had called her son, begging for $5,000 to save his wife and unborn grandchild, and said, "If she loses the baby, perhaps it is for the best." Victoria had hired a doctor to write a fake psychological report calling Morgan insane. That doctor turned up dead in a car wreck 48 hours later. The signed confession disappeared from his office the same night. Victoria Whitmore thought she had won. She thought she had crushed the waitress. She thought money could buy anything, including a grandchild ripped from its mother's arms. But Victoria made one fatal mistake. She never checked Morgan's lockbox. She never read the documents inside. And she never, ever expected that the doctor she paid $200,000 to destroy Morgan was Morgan's own uncle, her mother's brother. Blood she did not know existed. When the truth hit that courtroom, it was not just a revelation, it was a reckoning. And the girl they called Nobody turned out to be the one person who could bring the entire Whitmore empire to its knees. This is not a fairy tale. There is no fairy godmother. There is only a woman who refused to break. Lesson and value. This story carries a truth that every woman, every mother, and every person who has ever been told they are not enough needs to hear. Your worth is not determined by your bank account, your last name, or the people who tried to break you. It is determined by what you do when the world gives you every reason to quit, and you choose to keep fighting, not for revenge, not for money, but for the people you love. If this story hit you somewhere deep, do me a small favor. Hit that like button. It costs you nothing, but it helps this video reach someone out there who is going through their own fight right now and needs to hear that they are not alone. Drop a comment and tell me, would you have forgiven Victoria, or would you have walked away forever? I read every single comment, and I want to hear your answer. And if you have not subscribed yet, now is the time. Hit subscribe, turn on that notification bell, and I promise you, the next story is going to hit even harder. The courtroom smelled like floor polish and old wood. That was the first thing Morgan Cole noticed when she walked through the heavy double doors on the coldest morning of January. Not the rows of mahogany benches, not the American flag hanging limp beside the judge's chair, not the 6 attorneys in $1,000 suits sitting across the aisle like a wall of expensive cologne and contempt. She noticed the smell because it reminded her of the group home in Yonkers, where she had spent 3 years of her childhood. They used the same floor polish there, cheap stuff that burned your nostrils and made your eyes water. The courts and the foster system, it turned out, bought their cleaning supplies from the same catalog. Morgan was 9 months pregnant. Her ankles were swollen, her back ached with every step. She was wearing a navy blue dress that Dee had found at a thrift store in Flatbush and altered on her kitchen table at 2 in the morning. It fit well enough. It hid the fact that Morgan had lost 8 pounds in the last month because stress had stolen her appetite. She sat down at the plaintiff's table. Beside her was one chair, one lawyer, Rosa Gutierrez, 5'2", a legal aid veteran who had never owned a pair of shoes that cost more than $60 and who had a win rate in family court that made the expensive suits across the aisle very, very nervous. Very. Across the aisle, behind that wall of attorneys, sat Victoria Whitmore. She was wearing sunglasses indoors. Her legs were crossed. Her posture was perfect. She looked at Morgan the way you would look at a coffee stain on a white tablecloth, something to be cleaned up and forgotten. Beside Victoria sat Rowan Whitmore. He was a large man who took up space the way a truck takes up a parking spot, aggressively and without apology. He was sweating despite the air conditioning. His eyes kept darting to a folder on his lawyer's table. He knew what was in that folder. He knew what was coming. And for the first time in his adult life, Rowan Whitmore was afraid of a waitress. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Morgan gripped the edge of the table and pulled herself up. The baby kicked hard, right under her ribs. She winced, but she did not sit down until the judge did. The judge was an older man with reading glasses and a face that looked like it had been carved from patience. He opened a file. "In the matter of Whitmore versus Whitmore," the judge said, "regarding the petition for emergency custody of the unborn child." Morgan's hands were shaking under the table. She pressed them flat against her thighs. "This court has reviewed the submissions from both parties," the judge continued. He looked up. His eyes moved from the wall of expensive suits to Morgan, to her, one lawyer, to her swollen belly. He read one sentence. Morgan's face crumbled. Her knees buckled. She grabbed the table with both hands. A sharp pain shot through her abdomen, and she felt a warm rush of liquid down her legs. Her water had broken. Right there on the courtroom floor. Rosa caught her arm. Morgan, stay with me." The courtroom erupted. Victoria Whitmore removed her sunglasses for the first time. Her expression was unreadable. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. This story does not begin in a courtroom. It begins 7 months earlier, in a diner in Brooklyn, with a cup of coffee and a woman who had no idea that the man sitting in booth number 4 was about to change her life forever, and that his mother was about to try to destroy it. The Starlight Diner sat on the corner of Flatbush and Church like it had been there since the invention of bacon. It probably had. The vinyl booths were cracked. The coffee was strong enough to wake the dead. The neon sign outside buzzed with a persistent flicker that the owner, a retired Greek man named Gus, had been promising to fix since 2016. Morgan Cole worked the morning shift. She had worked the morning shift 6 days a week for 2 years. She was good at it. She was fast, she was polite, and she had a photographic memory that meant she never wrote down an order and never got one wrong. A table 7 wants the eggs over easy, wheat toast, no butter, and a side of fruit instead of hash browns, Morgan said, clipping the ticket to the kitchen line without looking at it. Gus squinted at the ticket. "How you remember all this? You got a computer in your head?" "I got rent due in 6 days, Gus. That's better than a computer." It was a Tuesday in June. The diner was half full. Morgan was refilling coffee for a construction worker who always left a $2 tip when the bell above the door jingled and her best friend walked in. Dee Washington was still wearing her scrubs from the night shift at Mount Sinai, Queens. She had the look of a woman who had been awake for 14 hours and was being kept alive purely by stubbornness and the promise of free coffee. "You look terrible," Morgan said, already pouring. "Thank you. I feel terrible. I had a guy come in at 3 in the morning who swallowed a fork." "A whole fork?" "A whole fork. On purpose. He said his ex-girlfriend dared him to." "And he did it?" "Morgan, men will do literally anything except go to therapy." Morgan laughed and slid into the booth across from Dee. She had a 10-minute break. She used it wisely. "So," Dee said, wrapping both hands around the mug like it was a life preserver, "tonight is the night. Dinner with the in-laws." Morgan nodded. Her smile faded. "The penthouse, 5th Avenue. Girl, I have seen Victoria Whitmore in magazines. That woman once made a caterer cry at a charity gala because the shrimp was the wrong size. She measured it with a ruler." "Charlie says it will be fine." Charlie also thinks a studio apartment in Queens is cozy. That man is a golden retriever in a human suit. He is sweet, but he does not understand danger. Morgan looked down at her hands. They were rough from hot plates and dish soap. Her nails were short. She had a small burn scar on her left wrist from a grease splatter last month. Dee, I have to tell them about the baby. Dee's eyes dropped to Morgan's stomach. Morgan was 3 months along, barely showing, but Dee was a nurse. She had noticed 2 weeks ago. You sure about this? Once you tell those people, there is no going back. Charlie is their only son. They deserve to know. They deserve a lot of things. A reality check, for starters. Dee sipped her coffee. You remember what my foster mama Gloria always said? You quote Gloria every day, Dee. Because Gloria was right about everything. She said, never walk into a rich person's house hungry. Eat first. When your stomach is full, you cannot be bought with a meal. Morgan smiled. So I should eat before I go. Eat 2 plates of eggs. Eat 3. Walk in there like you just had Thanksgiving dinner. Then whatever fancy nonsense they put in front of you, you can look at it and say, no thank you, I am already full. Morgan reached under the booth and touched the strap of her work bag. Inside the bag, at the very bottom, was a fireproof lockbox. Small, heavy, dented at one corner. She carried it everywhere. She had carried it since she was 6 years old. She did not open it. She had not opened it in years. The memories inside it were wrapped in smoke and screaming and the sound of a woman's voice saying, keep this safe, baby. Promise me. You okay? Dee asked. Yeah. Morgan pulled her hand back, just thinking about my mom. She would be proud of you, Morgan. She would tell me to eat the eggs. They both laughed. And for a few more minutes, the world felt manageable. That evening, Charlie Whitmore picked Morgan up outside the diner in a car he had borrowed from a college friend because he had already started quietly distancing himself from his family's money. He was wearing a tie he had practiced knotting 4 times. His hands were sweating on the steering wheel. They're going to love you, Charlie said. You have said that 9 times since yesterday, because it is true. Charlie. Morgan put her hand on his arm. If this goes bad tonight, I need you to promise me something. It will not go bad. If it does, do not choose me over them out of guilt. Choose me because you mean it. Because if you resent me in 5 years for what you lost tonight, that will hurt worse than anything your mother can say to me. Charlie looked at her. He was a kind man. He was sheltered, privileged, and occasionally naive, but he was genuinely kind. That was the thing Morgan had fallen in love with, not the penthouse, not the last name, but the fact that Charlie Whitmore treated a waitress with the same respect he treated everyone else. I choose you, Charlie said. I choose you right now. I will choose you tomorrow. And if my parents cannot see what I see, then they are the ones who are blind. Morgan squeezed his hand. She wanted to believe him, but she had spent her whole life learning that people leave. Foster parents give you back. Social workers rotate out. Friends from group homes drift away. Everyone leaves eventually. The only thing that had never left her was the lockbox. The elevator opened directly into the foyer of the Whitmore penthouse on 5th Avenue. The air smelled like expensive lilies and something chemical that Morgan later learned was a high-end floor wax imported from Italy that cost $90 a bottle. A butler took their coats without making eye contact. Morgan had never met a butler before. She had seen them in movies, but in real life, it turned out, they were just people who had been trained to pretend you were invisible. Victoria Whitmore was waiting in the drawing room. She stood by the fireplace, holding a glass of white wine with the precision of someone who understood that even the angle of a wine glass communicates power. Victoria was 61 years old. She had silver blonde hair cut in a sharp bob. She wore a cream cashmere sweater and slacks that cost more than Morgan's rent. Her posture was flawless. Her smile was a weapon. She did not hug Charlie, she assessed him. Then her eyes moved to Morgan, and the assessment became a dissection. Victoria's gaze traveled from Morgan's sensible heels to her inexpensive earrings, to the small scar on her left wrist. So, Victoria said, her voice was like cracking ice on a winter lake. This is the situation. This is Morgan, Charlie said. His voice was firm, but Morgan could feel his hand trembling in hers. My wife. Wife. Rowan Whitmore entered from the study. He was holding a cigar in one hand and a rocks glass in the other. He was a large man, the kind who fills a doorway not because he has to, but because he wants you to know he can. A courthouse signature does not make a wife in this family, Charlie. It makes a liability. The dinner table was long enough to land a small plane on. They sat at opposite ends, the distance between them filled with mahogany, silver, and silence. Victoria served squab. Morgan did not know what squab was. She ate it politely. It tasted like expensive regret. So, Morgan, Victoria said, cutting her food with surgical precision. Charlie tells us you work in hospitality. I am a waitress at a diner in Brooklyn, Morgan said. She did not flinch. She did not dress it up. I was also finishing my degree in art history before I took some time off. Art history, Rowan snorted. A loud, wet sound. Fantastic. That prepares you for what exactly? Dusting frames at a museum? Dad, stop, Charlie warned. I am being practical, son. Rowan leaned forward, his bulk pressing against the table edge. You are the heir to a Fortune 500 company. We had an arrangement with the Kensington family. Their daughter Beatrice has been waiting for a call you never made. Instead, you bring us a girl who pours coffee. I love her, Charlie said, and she is pregnant. You are going to be grandparents. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked. The sound was enormous in the silence. Victoria set her fork down. The clink of silver against porcelain was as deliberate as a judge's gavel. She looked at Morgan, not with surprise, not with joy, with pure crystallized disgust. You trapped him. Excuse me, Morgan said. The oldest trick in the book. Victoria stood. She walked to a sideboard, opened a drawer, and pulled out a manila envelope. She tossed it across the table. It slid across the polished wood and stopped in front of Morgan's plate. That is a post-nuptial agreement, Victoria stated. And a check for $50,000. You will sign the papers. You will terminate the pregnancy, and you will disappear. Consider it a generous severance. Morgan stared at the check. $50,000. It was more money than she had ever seen in her life. It was also the price Victoria Whitmore had placed on her grandchild's existence. Morgan stood up. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. I am not a prostitute, Mrs. Whitmore. I am your son's wife. You are a gold digger, Rowan roared, slamming his fist on the table. The wine glasses trembled. Look at you. You have nothing. You come from nothing. You think you can walk into the Whitmore dynasty with a baby in your belly and sit at this table? But it was Victoria's next words that turned the room to ice. Victoria stepped closer to Morgan. She lowered her voice so that only Morgan could hear, but Morgan heard every syllable with the photographic clarity that recorded everything she ever encountered. Let me be perfectly clear, Victoria whispered. If you do not sign those papers, I will use every resource this family has to prove you are an unfit mother. You have no family, no money, no stable home. I will take that child from you before it draws its first breath, and I will raise it as a Whitmore, without you. Morgan felt the floor tilt. This was not just snobbery. This was a threat, a custody threat against her unborn baby. Charlie knocked his chair over, standing up. "We are leaving. If you walk out that door," Rowan said, his voice dropping to a growl, "you leave everything, the trust fund, the apartment, the cards, the car. You will be cut off completely. You will be nothing." Charlie looked at his father. He looked at his mother, who was staring at Morgan with cold satisfaction. Then he looked at Morgan, who was holding back tears, one hand pressed against her stomach. "Keep the money," Charlie said. He took Morgan's hand. "I would rather starve than turn into you." They walked out. The elevator doors closed. Victoria's laughter followed them down the shaft, sharp and barking. "He will be back in a week," Victoria shouted. "When the little waitress realizes he is broke, she will leave him faster than she can pour a cup of coffee." In the elevator, Morgan broke. The tears came all at once, violent and shaking. "Charlie, she means it. She has the money. She has the lawyers. I have nothing. They could actually take our baby." Charlie pulled her close. He held her as the elevator descended, 42 floors, from the penthouse to the street. He held her as they stepped out into the warm June night. He held her as they walked 3 blocks to the subway because they could not afford a cab. And somewhere above them, Victoria Whitmore poured herself another glass of Chardonnay and began making phone calls. The first was to her attorney. The second was to a private investigator. The third was to every firm in Manhattan where Charlie might apply for a job. The war had begun, and Morgan Cole did not yet know that she was bringing a slingshot to a cannon fight. The disownment happened with the speed and precision of a surgical amputation. Within 48 hours, Charlie Whitmore went from being the heir to a billion-dollar empire to being a man whose credit card was declined at a gas station in Queens. It was not just the money that disappeared. It was the entire infrastructure of a privileged life. The phone plan, canceled, the gym membership, terminated, the health insurance, gone. Every safety net Charlie had ever known was cut away with a single phone call from Rowan Whitmore's assistant, who probably felt bad about it, but not bad enough to refuse. They found an apartment on the 4th floor of a walk-up building in Astoria. The elevator had been broken since 2019. The radiator clanked all night, like a ghost with a grudge. The view from the bedroom window was a brick wall and a fire escape, where a pigeon had built a nest and refused to leave. "I think the pigeon was here first," Morgan said, looking at the bird through the streaky glass. "We might be the intruders." "I will talk to the pigeon," Charlie said. "Negotiate terms." "Your Wharton degree is finally useful." They laughed. It was a small laugh, fragile and brief, but it was real, and in those first weeks, the laughter was what kept them afloat. Charlie looked for work. He had a business degree from one of the best schools in the country. He was smart, articulate, and willing to start at the bottom. But every interview followed the same pattern. The first round would go well. The second round would go even better. Then the background check would come back, and the hiring manager's voice would change. "We have decided to go in a different direction. Unfortunately, the position has been filled. We will keep your resume on file." It took Charlie 3 weeks to understand what was happening. Rowan Whitmore had blacklisted his own son. Every firm, every bank, every consulting company in Manhattan had received the same quiet message: "Hire Charlie Whitmore, and you will never do business with Whitmore Global again." Charlie told Morgan about it on a Tuesday evening. They were eating pasta with butter and garlic, which had become their default dinner because the ingredients cost $3.40. "He did not just cut me off," Charlie said. His voice was flat with disbelief. "He is making sure no one else picks me up." Morgan was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "When I was in foster care, there was this older girl named Tamika. She was 17, aging out of the system, and everyone told her she would end up nowhere. You know what she said?" "What?" "She said, 'When you are broke, you have two things, your time and your brain. Do not waste either one feeling sorry for yourself. Make a plan.'" "What happened to Tamika?" "She is an accountant in Newark, owns her own house, 2 cats." Charlie almost smiled. "I like Tamika." "So make a plan, Charlie. Your father closed the doors in Manhattan. Fine. Manhattan is not the whole world." The next day, Charlie took a job at a construction site in New Jersey. The foreman was a 58-year-old Italian-American named Frank Paletti, who had hands like catcher's mitts and a voice that sounded like gravel being poured into a bucket. "You ever held a hammer before?" Frank asked, looking at Charlie's soft hands. "Not professionally." "That is the most honest answer I have ever gotten. Most guys lie." "Okay, college boy, here is your hammer. Here is your hard hat. The hat goes on your head. The hammer does not. If you hit yourself, I will not feel bad for you. Questions?" "Where's the bathroom?" "It is a portable toilet behind the dumpster. It does not have Wi-Fi. Welcome to the real world." Frank was rough, loud, and completely without pretense. He was also the first person in Charlie's life who treated him exactly the same, regardless of his last name. When Charlie struggled, Frank showed him what to do. When Charlie complained, Frank told him to shut up and drink water. When Charlie worked hard, Frank nodded once and said nothing, which, from Frank Paletti, was the equivalent of a standing ovation. Morgan kept working at the diner through her 4th month, then her 5th. She was slowing down. Her ankles swelled. Her blood pressure crept upward. Dee watched her with increasing concern. "Your numbers are not good, Morgan." "My numbers are fine." "Your numbers are not fine. I am a nurse. I can read a blood pressure cuff. You need to slow down. We need the money. You need to be alive to spend the money." In her 6th month, Morgan collapsed at the diner. One moment she was carrying 2 plates of eggs to table 4. The next moment she was on the floor, the plates shattered around her, Gus shouting her name, the world going gray at the edges. Dee was called. She came straight from the hospital, still in her scrubs, and rode in the ambulance, holding Morgan's hand. The diagnosis was severe preeclampsia, dangerously high blood pressure. Her kidneys were struggling. The doctors put her on immediate bed rest. "You cannot work," the doctor said. "You cannot stress. You need to rest, eat well, and stay calm. If your blood pressure spikes again, we may need to deliver the baby early. At 6 months, that is extremely risky." Morgan lay in the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling. Charlie was sitting beside her, still covered in drywall dust from the job site. He had run 6 blocks to the train when he got the call. His hands were blistered and raw, and he was holding hers like she might float away. They had lost their only stable income. The rent was due in 12 days. They had $41 in their checking account. "I'm going to call my mother," Charlie said. "Charlie, no. I'm not going to beg for money. I'm going to ask for insurance. Just insurance. Just enough to cover your medical care. She is still my mother." Even she would not let her grandchild die. Morgan looked at him. She wanted to believe it. She wanted to believe that somewhere inside Victoria, Whitmore, there was a grandmother who would choose a baby's life over her pride. "Okay," Morgan whispered. "Call her." Charlie found a payphone outside the hospital. His cell service had been cut off 2 days earlier. He stood in the cold, feeding quarters into the slot and dialed the number to the Whitmore penthouse. The butler answered. "Whitmore residence. Let me speak to my mother." A pause. Then Victoria's voice, crisp and controlled. "Well, I assume you are ready to apologize." "Mom, please." Charlie pressed his forehead against the cold metal of the phone booth. "Morgan is in the hospital. It is bad. The baby is in trouble. We have no insurance. They need to run tests. I just need $5,000. I will pay you back. I will sign whatever you want. Just help us." Silence. A long, deliberate silence. Charlie could hear the clink of a wine glass being set down on a marble counter. He could hear classical music playing softly in the background. Vivaldi. His mother always listened to Vivaldi in the evenings. "You made your bed, Charlie," Victoria said. Her voice was perfectly even, not angry, not emotional, just flat, clinical. "If she loses the baby, perhaps it is for the best. It gives you a clean slate. Come home." The line went dead, not even a goodbye, just a click, and then the dial tone, buzzing in his ear like a wasp trapped in a jar. Charlie stood in the phone booth for a full minute. Rain was starting to fall. The receiver dangled from its cord. Something inside him that had been holding out hope. Some last thread of belief that his parents were still human beneath the money, snapped like a guitar, string pulled too tight. He walked back to Morgan's room. She was awake, hooked to monitors that beeped in steady rhythm. "Did you call them?" she asked. "Yes." "What did they say?" "They said no." Morgan did not cry. A strange calmness settled over her face, the kind of calm that comes not from peace, but from the total exhaustion of hope. She had spent her whole life being told no. By foster parents who sent her back, by caseworkers who lost her file, by a world that treated children without families like administrative problems to be managed. She had survived every number. She would survive this one. "Okay," Morgan whispered. "No more begging." That was the first catastrophe. The second came 72 hours later. Morgan was discharged with strict instructions for bed rest. They returned to their apartment in Astoria. Charlie picked up double shifts at the construction site. Dee organized a rotation of friends from the hospital to check on Morgan during the day. Then the process server arrived. He was a thin man, with a clipboard and an expression that suggested he did not enjoy his job, but was very efficient at it. He handed Morgan a thick envelope. "Morgan Cole Whitmore?" "Yes." "You have been served." Inside the envelope was a legal filing from the law offices of Chambers, Whitfield, and Park, attorneys for Victoria Whitmore. It was a petition for emergency prenatal custody evaluation. The filing alleged that Morgan's living conditions were unfit for a child. It cited her lack of family support, her unstable employment history, her medical complications, and the size and condition of their apartment. It requested that a court-appointed social worker inspect the home within 7 days, and that if conditions were found lacking, temporary custody of the child be granted to Victoria and Rowan Whitmore upon birth. Morgan read the filing 3 times. Her photographic memory captured every word, every clause, every carefully constructed sentence designed to make a waitress in a walk-up apartment look like a danger to her own child. "She is not just trying to keep us away," Morgan said to Dee on the phone that night. "She is trying to take the baby before it is even born." Can she do that? "She has 6 lawyers and unlimited money. I have a diner apron and $41. That was the second catastrophe. The third came when Charlie tried to reach his sister, Helen Whitmore, the family secret. She had married a black man named Marcus 8 years ago and been quietly erased from the Whitmore family tree. Charlie had not spoken to her since the wedding. Victoria had made sure of that. He found Helen's number through an old college friend. He called from Dee's phone. Helen answered. Her voice was cautious, but warm. "Charlie, is that really you?" "Helen, I need help." Mom and Dad cut me off. Morgan is pregnant and sick. Mom is trying to take custody of the baby. Long pause. She did the same thing to me. What? When I married Marcus, Mom filed a CPS report against us. She claimed our house was unsafe. She sent a private investigator to follow Marcus for 3 months, trying to find something to use against him. She tried to have our marriage license challenged on a technicality. Charlie felt sick. What happened? We survived. Barely. Marcus almost left me because of the stress. But I found a lawyer who... The call dropped. Dead silence. Charlie looked at the phone. The screen was dark. He called Dee. What happened to your phone? Nothing. It is working fine on my end. Try again. He tried again. The call would not connect. He tried a different number. Nothing. Then a text came through from an unknown number. This phone line has been flagged for review per a telecommunications hold request. Rowan Whitmore had flagged Helen's number. Any call to or from Helen Whitmore was being intercepted and blocked. The Whitmores were not just cutting Charlie off from money, they were cutting him off from allies. Charlie stood in the rain outside a bodega in Queens, holding a borrowed phone that could not reach the one person who understood what they were going through. 3 catastrophes in 8 days. Morgan bedridden. A custody battle filed, their only potential ally unreachable. And Victoria Whitmore sat in her penthouse, sipping Chardonnay, watching Vivaldi fill the silence where her conscience should have been. The first person to fight back was Dee Washington. She could not give money. A night shift nurse with twins does not have money to give. But she had something more valuable. She had a network. My cousin Janelle works at Legal Aid in downtown Brooklyn, Dee told Morgan the next morning, sitting on the edge of the bed with 2 cups of coffee and a legal pad. She says you do not need a fancy lawyer for the custody evaluation. You need to prove 3 things: stable environment, medical care, community support. That is it. Dee, look at this apartment. I am looking at it, and by Saturday, it is going to look like a page from a home magazine. Dee made phone calls. She called nurses from her floor. She called women from her church. She called Frank Paletti, who showed up with a toolbox, and his nephew, a plumber. The radiator has been broken for how long? Frank said, looking at the clanking metal beast in the corner. Since we moved in, Charlie said. That is criminal. Literally. Your landlord is violating housing code. I am fixing this, and then I am calling the city. By Saturday, the apartment was transformed. Not luxurious, not fancy, but clean, warm, organized, and filled with evidence of a community that cared. Dee had typed up character reference letters from 3 nurses, a pastor, and Frank Paletti, who had written in his slow, careful handwriting, Charlie Whitmore is the hardest working man on my crew. He shows up early, and he never complains. Any kid would be lucky to have him as a father. The social worker visited on Monday. She was a tired woman in her 40s who had seen 1,000 apartments and could tell within 30 seconds whether a home was safe. She looked at the clean floors, the working radiator, the stocked fridge, the prenatal vitamins lined up on the kitchen counter. She looked at the character references. She looked at Morgan, who was calm, articulate, and answered every question with the precision of someone whose memory forgot nothing. 2 weeks later, the report came back. No evidence of unfit conditions. Custody petition denied. Morgan cried. Charlie cried. Dee brought a grocery store cake that said happy birthday because it was the cheapest one, and she scraped off the writing with a butter knife. We won, Charlie said, holding Morgan. We survived round 1, Morgan corrected. Your mother does not lose gracefully. Morgan was right. The first false victory lasted exactly 11 days. On the 12th day, a man appeared at their door. He was not a process server this time. He was a private investigator hired by Victoria Whitmore, and he carried a folder that made Morgan's blood go cold. "This is a courtesy notice," the man said. "Mrs. Whitmore's attorneys have filed an appeal of the custody ruling, citing new evidence. A psychological evaluation conducted by Dr. Raymond Hargrove concludes that your childhood trauma, lack of familial bonds, and history of abandonment make you a statistically high risk for postpartum psychosis and child neglect." Morgan took the folder. She opened it. The evaluation was 12 pages long, filled with clinical language and diagnostic codes. It described her childhood in detail. The fire, the foster homes, the years of instability. It concluded that Morgan Cole was psychologically unfit to be a mother. "This doctor never examined me," Morgan said. "I have never met anyone named Hargrove. That will be for the appeals court to determine." The door closed. Morgan stood in the hallway, holding 12 pages of lies that a stranger had written about her for money. She called Dee at 3 in the morning. She bought a doctor. She manufactured a psychological evaluation from someone who has never met me. And now she is going to take it to a judge and say, "I am crazy." Can she do that? She already did it. The second false victory was dead. But that night, lying awake in the dark apartment, Morgan started thinking about the name. Hargrove. Dr. Raymond Hargrove. It tugged at something in the deep filing cabinet of her photographic memory. She had seen that name before, not in a hospital, not in a news article. She had seen it in the lockbox. Morgan waited until Charlie left for his shift at 5 in the morning. Then she got out of bed, slowly, carefully, one hand on her belly, and pulled the fireproof lockbox from under the bed. She had carried this box since she was 6 years old. It was the only thing she had from her parents, the only thing that survived the fire that killed them. She had been told that her mother pushed the box into her arms and told her to run. Morgan did not remember the running. She remembered the smoke and the screaming, and then she was outside on the grass, and the house was gone, and her parents were gone, and all she had was this dented metal box. She had opened it a few times as a teenager. She had found documents she did not understand, legal papers filled with language that meant nothing to a 16-year-old girl in foster care. She had closed it and not opened it again. Now she opened it. Her hands were steady. Her mind was clear. The photographic memory that had served her well as a waitress was about to serve a very different purpose. She laid the contents on the bed like evidence at a crime scene. Item 1. A birth certificate. Catherine Elizabeth Hargrove. Born 1966 in White Plains, New York. Mother, Anne Hargrove. Father, Judge Robert Hargrove, Sr. Morgan stared at the name. Hargrove. Her mother's maiden name was Hargrove. Item 2. A marriage certificate. Catherine Hargrove married David Cole in 1991. A simple civil ceremony. No family listed as witnesses. Item 3. A photograph, faded and creased. A young woman standing in front of a massive stone building. Morgan recognized her mother's face immediately, the same eyes Morgan saw in the mirror every morning. On the building behind her, chiseled into granite, Hargrove and Associates. Established, 1952. Item 4. A bundle of letters, tied with a rubber band that crumbled when Morgan touched it. The letters were from Judge Robert Hargrove, Sr. to his daughter, Catherine. They spanned 10 years. The tone shifted from angry to pleading to desperate. "Catherine, come home. Your mother is ill. Catherine, I do not understand why you left. Whatever I did, I am sorry. Catherine, I have set up a trust for your children. It cannot be revoked. Even if you never speak to me again, your children will be provided for. This is the only way I know how to love you from a distance." Item 5. The legal document Morgan had never understood. She read it now with adult eyes and the focus of a woman fighting for her child's life. It was a trust document, irrevocable, established by Judge Robert Hargrove Sr. in 1997. The beneficiary was listed as any biological child or children of Catherine Elizabeth Hargrove. The trustee was listed as Theodore Graham, First Republic Trust, White Plains, New York. The trust had been funded with $800,000. It had been sitting dormant for over 20 years, waiting for a beneficiary to claim it. Morgan sat on the bed, surrounded by yellowed paper and a dead man's letters, and understood three things simultaneously. First, her mother had been the daughter of Judge Robert Hargrove Sr., the founder of one of New York's most respected law firms and a legendary figure in the New York legal community. Second, there was a trust fund with her name on it that no one had ever told her about because no one knew she existed. Third, and this was the part that made her hands go cold, Dr. Raymond Hargrove, the man Victoria Whitmore had paid to write a fraudulent psychological evaluation of Morgan, was her mother's younger brother, her uncle. Victoria had hired Morgan's own blood relative to destroy her, and neither of them knew. Morgan picked up the photograph of her mother, Catherine Hargrove Cole, a woman who had run away from wealth and privilege to live a simple life with a mechanic she loved. A woman who had died in a fire but had enough presence of mind to save a metal box full of documents that would one day save her daughter. You knew, Morgan whispered to the photograph. You did not know what would happen, but you knew I would need this someday. She closed the box. She picked up Dee's phone. She dialed a number. Dee, I need you to come over and bring a laptop. I need to find a man named Theodore Graham in White Plains. Theodore Graham was 81 years old. He lived in a modest colonial house in Westchester with a cat named Verdict and a garden full of tomatoes. He had been Judge Robert Hargrove's law partner for 30 years and the trustee of the Hargrove Family Trust since 1997. When Morgan and Rosa Gutierrez showed up on his doorstep on a Wednesday afternoon, Theodore looked at Morgan for a long time through his screen door. Then he opened it and said, "You have Catherine's eyes." Rosa Gutierrez was the lawyer Helen Whitmore had connected them with after Charlie finally reached his sister through a letter hand delivered by Frank Paletti's nephew, who drove to Atlanta on a weekend and knocked on Helen's door. Helen had cried when she read the letter. She called Rosa the same day. Rosa was 5'2", 53 years old, and had spent her career at a scrappy legal aid clinic in the Bronx, taking on wealthy families who weaponized the court system against vulnerable mothers. She had a win rate that terrified opposing counsel and a wardrobe that consisted entirely of black suits she bought in bulk from a discount store in Jersey City. "Tell me everything," Rosa had said in their first meeting. Morgan did. Rosa took notes for 3 hours. At the end, she looked up and said, "We are going to win, and it is going to hurt them." Now, in Theodore Graham's living room, the pieces came together. Theodore confirmed the trust, $800,000, plus 20 years of modest interest. Morgan was the sole beneficiary. The paperwork was clean, legal, and airtight. "Your grandfather never stopped hoping Catherine would come home," Theodore said, pouring tea with slightly shaking hands. "When he died, in 2001, his will specifically instructed that the trust remain active indefinitely. He believed she was alive somewhere. He believed she had children." "She did," Morgan said quietly. "She had me." But the trust was not the only thing Theodore had. "Your grandfather and Rowan Whitmore had business dealings," Theodore said, setting down his cup. In 1998, Robert loaned Rowan the seed capital for his shipping expansion, $40 million. It was structured as a personal debt, not corporate, a handshake deal between two men who had known each other for decades. Was it repaid? Rosa asked. It was not. Your grandfather died before he could collect. The estate attorneys did not know about it because it was not in the corporate files. But Robert documented everything. Theodore stood slowly, walked to a filing cabinet that looked older than some countries, and pulled out a thick folder. 14 original letters in Rowan Whitmore's own handwriting acknowledging the debt. Notarized loan documents, bank records showing the initial wire transfer. Rosa opened the folder. She read for 10 minutes. Then she looked at Morgan with an expression that Morgan had never seen on a lawyer's face before. It was joy. With interest, Rosa said, this debt is worth approximately $120 million, and it is secured against Rowan Whitmore's personal assets, not the company, his personal holdings. Morgan sat very still. My family funded the Whitmore empire, and the Whitmores never paid your family back. The irony was so enormous, it was almost funny. Victoria Whitmore had called Morgan a nobody, a gold digger, a girl who came from nothing. But Morgan's grandfather had literally bankrolled the fortune that Victoria was so desperate to protect. Over the next 2 weeks, the team assembled. Rosa handled the legal strategy. Theodore provided the documentation. Helen Whitmore provided testimony and records of Victoria's pattern of harassment against her own family members. And then there was Dr. Raymond Hargrove. Rosa contacted him through a colleague. She did not tell him about Morgan at first. She simply informed him that his fraudulent psychological evaluation was being investigated and that he had 2 choices: cooperate or face criminal charges. Raymond Hargrove came to Rosa's office on a rainy Thursday. He was a thin man in his late 50s with nervous hands and the look of someone who had made a terrible mistake and knew it. Rosa laid out the evidence. The wire transfer of $200,000 from Victoria Whitmore's personal account to a shell company Raymond owned. The evaluation he had written without ever meeting the subject. The legal consequences of filing a fraudulent psychological report in a custody case. Raymond's face went gray. I did not know it was for a custody case. She told me it was for an insurance evaluation. She said the woman was a fraud who was trying to steal her son's money. Did you examine Morgan Cole? Rosa asked. No, I never met her. Mrs. Whitmore gave me the background information, and I wrote the report based on that. I know it was wrong. I knew it when I did it. I needed the money. Rosa leaned forward. Dr. Hargrove, what was your mother's maiden name? My mother. Her name was Anne Hargrove. My father was Judge Robert. He stopped. His face changed. Why are you asking me about my family? Did your father have other children? He had a daughter, Catherine. She ran away when she was 19. We never found her. My father searched for years. He died without knowing what happened to her. Rosa slid a photograph across the table. The photograph from the lockbox. Catherine Hargrove standing in front of the family firm. Raymond picked it up with trembling hands. Catherine married a mechanic named David Cole, Rosa said. They had a daughter. Catherine and David died in a house fire in 1998. Their daughter survived. She grew up in foster care. She is now 28 years old, pregnant, and fighting a custody battle against Victoria Whitmore. Rosa paused. Her name is Morgan Cole. She is your niece. And you wrote the report that Victoria is using to try to take her baby. Raymond Hargrove stared at the photograph. Then he stared at Rosa. Then he put his face in his hands and wept. He signed a recantation that day. A full, notarized admission that the psychological evaluation was fraudulent, commissioned and paid for by Victoria Whitmore, and written without any examination of the subject. He agreed to testify in court. For the first time in months, Morgan felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. It lasted 4 days. On a Monday night, Rosa called Morgan at 11 p.m. Her voice was different, flat, careful. "Morgan, Dr. Hargrove is dead." The room tilted. "What?" "Car accident. Single vehicle. He drove off Route 9 into a ravine. The police are calling it an accident. Wet roads, no guardrail. It was not an accident. We cannot prove that. And Morgan, his office was broken into last night. The signed recantation is gone." Morgan sat in the dark apartment. Charlie was asleep. The baby kicked steadily against her ribs. She pressed her hand against her stomach and felt the tiny foot pushing back. Alive and insistent and completely dependent on a woman who was running out of options. She thought about giving up. She thought about packing a bag and disappearing, the way her mother had, changing her name, starting over in some small town where Victoria Whitmore could not reach her. She called Dee. "I cannot do this," Morgan whispered. "She is too powerful. She kills people, Dee. She kills people and calls it an accident, and nobody questions it because she has money." "Morgan Cole, you listen to me." Dee's voice was shaking, not with fear, but with fury. "Your mama did not die pushing a lockbox into your arms so you could run. She saved those papers because she knew. Somehow she knew you would need them. You do not get to quit. You fight. You hear me? You fight." Rosa Gutierrez did not panic. She had lost witnesses before. She had faced powerful opponents before. She had walked into courtrooms where the odds were so stacked against her that the bailiff gave her a sympathetic look on the way in. "The recantation is gone," Rosa told Morgan, "but the bank records are not. Victoria's wire transfer to Hargrove's shell company is documented in federal banking records. She cannot steal those. She cannot erase a wire transfer." Is it enough? It is enough to prove she paid him. Combined with the fact that he never examined you, combined with Helen's testimony about the pattern of behavior, combined with the estate phone recordings. What phone recordings? All calls to the Whitmore estate are logged by their security system. I subpoenaed the logs last week. Every call Charlie made to that penthouse was recorded, including the one where Victoria told her pregnant daughter-in-law that losing the baby would be for the best. Morgan closed her eyes. She remembered Charlie's face when he came back from the phone booth that night. The way he looked like something inside him had died. She said that on a recorded line? Rich people forget that their own security systems are always listening. It is their biggest weakness. They are so used to being protected that they forget the walls have ears. Rosa filed 3 simultaneous actions. A motion to dismiss Victoria's custody appeal, supported by evidence of the fraudulent evaluation and the bank records proving Victoria paid for it. A civil suit against Victoria for harassment, fraud, and witness tampering. And a demand letter to Rowan Whitmore for repayment of the $120 million personal debt owed to the Hargrove estate. The court date was set for January, the coldest month, the month when New York strips itself bare and there is nowhere to hide. The night before the hearing, Charlie's phone rang. He had a new phone now, paid for by the Hargrove Trust. The number on the screen was the Whitmore penthouse. He answered, "Charlie." Victoria's voice was soft, trembling. He had never heard his mother sound like this. "Sweetheart, I know I have made mistakes, but please, do not let this go to court. Come home. Bring the baby when it is born. We can be a family again. I will accept Morgan. I will try. Charlie sat on the edge of the bed. Morgan was pretending to be asleep. She was not asleep. Mom. Please, Charlie. I am your mother. I love you. Silence. The word love hung in the air like smoke. Call off the lawyers, Victoria said, and we can start over. Charlie hung up. He sat in the dark for a long time. Then he said, quietly, knowing Morgan was listening, she did not say she was sorry. She said, call off the lawyers. Morgan opened her eyes. Those are two very different things. Yeah, Charlie said. They are. He did not call back. The courtroom was full. The judge entered. Everyone rose. Rosa presented the case with the methodical precision of a surgeon. She laid out the timeline, the dinner, the threats, the disownment, the blacklisting, the custody petition, the fraudulent psychological evaluation, the payment to Dr. Hargrove, the suspicious death, the break-in at his office. She played the phone recording. Charlie's voice, begging, Victoria's voice, cold as a blade. If she loses the baby, perhaps it is for the best. The courtroom went silent. The judge removed his glasses and pressed his fingers against the bridge of his nose. Victoria's lead attorney looked at the table. He did not look up. Then Rosa called Helen Whitmore to testify via video. Helen appeared on the courtroom screen, composed and devastating. She described 8 years of erasure, the false CPS reports, the private investigators following her husband, the systematic campaign to punish her for marrying a man her parents did not approve of. My mother does not oppose people, Helen said. She destroys them. She destroys them quietly, legally, and completely, and she does it to her own children. Rosa turned to the judge. Your Honor, one final matter. She presented the documents from Theodore Graham, the original letters, the notarized loan agreements, the bank records. Morgan Cole is the granddaughter of Judge Robert Hargrove Sr., founding partner of Hargrove and Associates and a member of this court's own legal community. Judge Hargrove loaned Rowan Whitmore $40 million in 1998 for the expansion of Whitmore Global. The debt was never repaid. With interest, it totals approximately $120 million, secured against Mr. Whitmore's personal assets. Rowan stood up. His face was the color of raw dough. That was a private arrangement. There is no documentation. Rosa held up the folder. 14 original letters in your handwriting, Mr. Whitmore. Notarized loan documents. Bank records. Would you like to see them? Rowan sat down. Morgan stood. Slowly. She was 9 months pregnant and exhausted, and her back ached and her feet were swollen, and she had not slept more than 4 hours a night in weeks. She stood with one hand on the table and one hand on her belly, and she looked directly at Victoria Whitmore. You threw $50,000 at me and told me to disappear, Morgan said. Her voice did not shake. You threatened to take my baby. You paid a doctor to call me crazy, a doctor who turned out to be my own uncle, my mother's brother, the brother she never got to see again because she ran away from the same kind of cruelty you tried to inflict on me. She paused. My name is Morgan Catherine Hargrove Cole. The girl you called nobody comes from a family that helped build the legal system you tried to use against me. And the fortune you are so desperate to protect? My grandfather funded it. You never paid him back. Victoria removed her sunglasses. For the first time, Morgan saw her eyes. They were blue, like Charlie's, and they were terrified. The judge ruled. He dismissed Victoria's custody appeal with prejudice. He issued a permanent restraining order against both Victoria and Rowan Whitmore. He referred the case to the district attorney for investigation of fraud, witness tampering, and potential involvement in Dr. Hargrove's death. And then Morgan did the thing that separated her from Victoria Whitmore forever. She showed mercy. Your Honor, Morgan said, I would like to offer the respondents a choice. The judge raised an eyebrow. Proceed. Option A, I call the debt. Mr. Whitmore's personal assets are liquidated to cover $120 million. They lose everything. Victoria gripped Rowan's arm. Option B, they retire from the company. Charlie assumes leadership. They keep a house in Connecticut and receive a monthly stipend of $4,000. The same amount Charlie and I lived on when they cut us off. Victoria opened her mouth. $4,000? That will not cover... It will cover what you need, Morgan said. Not what you want. That is a lesson I learned the hard way, Mrs. Whitmore. And now it is your turn. She looked at Victoria one last time. This is not revenge. This is mercy. Because unlike you, I know what it feels like to lose everything. And I would not wish that on anyone. Not even you. Rowan signed. Victoria signed. The judge accepted the agreement. And then Morgan's water broke. The ambulance ride from the courthouse to Mount Sinai was 7 minutes. Rosa rode in the front seat, calling ahead to the hospital. Charlie rode in the back, holding Morgan's hand, his face pale. This is not how I planned today, Morgan said through gritted teeth as a contraction hit. You just dismantled a billion-dollar family in a courtroom, and now you are having a baby in the same afternoon, Charlie said. Our son is going to have a flair for dramatic timing. He gets that from you. He gets that from you. Dee was waiting at the hospital entrance. She was already in scrubs, already in charge. She took one look at Morgan and started giving orders to the nurses like a general commanding troops. Get her into delivery room 4. Page Dr. Okafor. Someone get the father a chair before he passes out. Charlie, you are green. Sit down. I am not going to pass out. You are going to pass out. Sit down and drink juice. The delivery was fast and uncomplicated, which Morgan felt she had earned after the past 7 months of nothing being fast or uncomplicated. At 6:47 in the evening, with the winter sun setting orange through the hospital window, and Dee counting, and Charlie holding her hand so tight she thought he might break a finger, Morgan Cole brought her son into the world. Luke David, Cole Whitmore, 7 pounds, 4 ounces, a full head of dark hair, a scream that shook the room. The nurse placed him on Morgan's chest. He was warm and impossibly small, and his fingers curled around Morgan's thumb with a grip that seemed far too strong for someone who had been alive for 30 seconds. Morgan looked at her son. She looked at the tiny face that had been the center of a war, a custody battle, a courtroom reckoning, and a family implosion. He did not know any of that. He just knew warmth and heartbeat and the sound of his mother's voice. Hi, baby, Morgan whispered. I am your mom. I have been fighting for you for a long time, and I am never going to stop. Charlie leaned down and kissed them both. His eyes were red. Drywall dust was somehow still in his hair, despite the fact that he had not worked at the construction site in weeks. Some things, apparently, never fully wash out. Frank Paletti arrived an hour later. He was carrying a stuffed bear that was nearly as large as he was. He set it in the corner of the room, looked at the baby, and nodded once. Good-looking kid, Frank said. Strong grip. He turned to Charlie. You done good, college boy. From Frank Paletti, that was a 20-minute standing ovation. Helen arrived from Atlanta the next morning. She brought Marcus and their daughter, a bright-eyed 6-year-old named Joy, who immediately wanted to hold the baby and was very offended when told she had to wait. He is my cousin, Joy said. I should get priority. You are 6, Helen said. And he is 0. I have seniority. Dee brought the twins. Rosa brought flowers and a card that said congratulations on the outside and your bill is in the mail on the inside, which Morgan knew was a joke because Rosa had taken the case pro bono. Theodore Graham sent a letter. It was handwritten on cream stationery with the Hargrove and Associates letterhead. Dear Morgan, it read, your grandfather spent the last years of his life hoping to find Catherine. He never did, but I believe he would be at peace knowing that her daughter found her way home, not to a building, not to a name, but to the truth of who she is. Welcome to the family you always had. Morgan read the letter twice. Then she folded it carefully and placed it in the fireproof lockbox, next to her mother's photograph and her grandfather's letters. The box that had traveled with her through foster homes and group homes and a studio apartment in Astoria was now in a hospital room on the Upper East Side. It had come a long way. So had she. 2 years passed. Charlie ran Whitmore Global. He renamed the charitable division the Catherine Hargrove Foundation. It funded legal aid for mothers fighting custody battles against wealthy opponents. In its first year, it helped 212 women. By the second year, that number had tripled. Morgan finished her law degree. She graduated third in her class, which annoyed her because she had wanted to be first. She joined Rose's firm, specializing in the exact kind of case she had survived. Her first client was a 23-year-old hotel maid whose ex-husband's wealthy family was trying to take her daughter. Morgan won in 4 weeks. Dee was promoted to charge nurse. She still stopped by the Starlight Diner for coffee on her way home from the night shift. Gus still had not fixed the neon sign. Frank Paletti retired from construction. He did not retire from being Luke's honorary grandfather. Every Saturday morning, he showed up at the brownstone in the West Village, where Morgan and Charlie now lived, and he taught Luke how to use a toy hammer. Luke was 2 years old and could not actually hold the hammer correctly, but Frank was patient. He had been patient with Charlie. He would be patient with Charlie's son. Helen and Arthur Kensington got married in a small ceremony in Atlanta. Marcus was the best man. Dee was a bridesmaid. Victoria was not invited. Victoria and Rowan lived in the cottage in Connecticut. They received their $4,000 a month. Victoria learned to cook, badly. Rowan learned to do laundry, worse. They watched the news. They saw Charlie on magazine covers. They saw Morgan cutting ribbons at charity events. They saw Luke growing up in photographs they were not part of. Victoria wrote letters every Christmas. Every January, they came back stamped with 2 words, return to sender. On a Tuesday afternoon in October, Morgan was at the Starlight Diner. She went back sometimes, not to work, but to sit in her old booth and drink Gus's terrible coffee and remember where she had started. She had brought Luke, who was eating pancakes with the focused intensity of a 2-year-old who has discovered syrup. The new waitress came by to refill Morgan's coffee. She was young, maybe 22. She moved quickly but carefully, the way people move when they are trying to be invisible. Morgan recognized the movement. She had moved that way for years. The waitress's name tag said, Brianna. She had a bruise on her wrist that she kept tugging her sleeve over. She was pregnant, maybe 4 months. She was trying to hide it. Morgan watched her for a few minutes. She watched the way Brianna flinched when a customer raised his voice. She watched the way Brianna's hand went to her stomach when she thought no one was looking, a protective gesture that Morgan knew in her bones. When Brianna came back to refill the coffee again, Morgan spoke. When are you due? Brianna froze. Her hand went to her sleeve. I do not know what you are talking about. It is okay, Morgan said gently. I am not going to tell anyone. Brianna looked at Morgan. She looked at Luke, who was covered in syrup and grinning. She looked at the expensive coat Morgan was wearing and the confidence in Morgan's posture. 4 months, Brianna whispered. I am figuring it out. Morgan reached into her bag and pulled out a business card. Rosa Gutierrez and Associates, Family Law. If you ever need help, Morgan said, call this number. Tell them Morgan sent you. They will not charge you anything. Brianna took the card. She held it the way Morgan had once held her mother's lockbox, like it might be the only thing that could save her. "Thank you," Brianna said. "You are going to be okay," Morgan said. She meant it. She knew what it felt like to be pregnant and terrified and convinced that the world was designed to crush people like her. She also knew what it felt like to discover that the world, despite its cruelty, was also full of people like Dee and Frank and Rosa and Helen, who would stand beside you when everything fell apart. Brianna walked away, tucking the card into her apron pocket. Morgan looked down at Luke. He had somehow gotten syrup in his hair, on his shirt, on the table, and on the stuffed dinosaur he carried everywhere. He looked up at her with Charlie's blue eyes and smiled a sticky, ridiculous, perfect smile. She thought about Victoria Whitmore's penthouse with its Italian floor wax and its expensive lilies and its cold, perfect silence. She thought about the manila envelope sliding across the mahogany table. $50,000 and a demand to erase her child from existence. She thought about what Victoria had valued: bloodlines, balance sheets, control, the appearance of perfection maintained at the cost of everything that actually mattered. And she thought about what she had now: a son with syrup in his hair, a husband who had given up billions and never once regretted it, a best friend who would fight a bear for her, a cranky old construction foreman who drove 40 minutes every Saturday to teach a 2-year-old how to hold a hammer. None of it was perfect. The brownstone needed a new roof. Luke had a cold every other week because that is what 2-year-olds do. Charlie still could not cook anything except pasta with butter. Morgan still woke up some nights in a cold sweat, dreaming about courtrooms and manila envelopes and a voice on a phone saying, if she loses the baby, perhaps it is for the best. But it was real. It was hers. And no one could take it away. Morgan picked up a napkin and wiped the syrup off Luke's cheek. He giggled and squirmed. "Come on, troublemaker," she said. "Let us go home." She left a $50 tip on the table. For Brianna. For the girl she used to be. For every waitress who has ever been told she is not enough. Outside, the October sun was golden. The neon sign of the Starlight Diner buzzed and flickered behind her. She put Luke on her hip and walked down the sidewalk, past the bodega, past the laundromat, past the fire hydrant where a kid was selling lemonade for $1 a cup. She did not look back. She had spent her whole life looking back. At the fire, at the foster homes, at the lockbox full of letters from a grandfather she never met. She was done looking back. Ahead of her, the city stretched out enormous and indifferent and full of possibility. She was Morgan Catherine Hargrove Cole Whitmore. She was a waitress. She was a lawyer. She was a mother. She was the girl they called Nobody, who turned out to be the only person in the room who knew what family actually meant. And somewhere in Connecticut, in a small cottage with a leaking faucet and a $4,000 monthly budget, Victoria Whitmore was sitting alone at a kitchen table, staring at a returned Christmas card, realizing for the 10,000th time that pride is a very poor substitute for a grandson's laugh. The Whitmores spent their whole lives building walls. Walls of money, walls of status, walls of cruelty. They thought those walls made them powerful, but Morgan proved something they never understood. Walls do not keep you safe. They keep you alone. And the girl they called Nobody built something the Whitmores never could. A door that was always open. This story reminds us of something we already know, but sometimes forget. Family is not defined by last names or bank accounts. It is defined by who shows up when the world turns its back on you. It is the friend who scrubs your kitchen at 2 a.m. It is the stranger who fixes your radiator without being asked. It is the lawyer who takes your case for free because she believes in you. Victoria Whitmore had everything. Money, power, status, a penthouse on Fifth Avenue. She ended up with exactly what she valued most, her pride. But pride cannot hug you back. Pride does not call you grandma. Pride does not smear syrup on your cheek and laugh. What would you have done in Morgan's place? Would you have shown mercy? Would you have forgiven Victoria for the sake of your child? Or would you have walked away forever to protect your peace? There is no easy answer, and that is what makes it worth thinking about. Let me know your honest thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. If this story moved you, hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and reach more people who need to hear stories like this. And do not forget to subscribe and turn on that notification bell so you never miss a new video. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one. Closing disclaimer: this content was researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful storytelling with real-life lessons. Every character, every scene, and every word was carefully crafted to entertain, inspire, and remind you of what truly matters. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one.